We continue our coverage on the passing of struggle stalwart Andrew Mlangeni, former minister and now Ahmed Kathrada Foundation chairperson. Derek Hanekom served with Mlangeni in various capacities within the ANC. He joins me now to share some of his memories of the struggle hero. Good evening, Derek. It's a pleasure to have you on the show tonight. I suppose you've had a whole day to reflect on the life of Ndade Andrew Mlangeni. Talk to me about some of the things that have been going on your mind, that have been on your mind, rather.
Yeah, well, thanks, Kathy, for having me on your show, and I hope you are well. And it's good to hear your voice again after some time. Let me just say, before I get into some of my own reflections in the course of the day, that this is just, I mean, the overwhelming thing is that this is a huge loss. A loss to the ANC, a loss to the alliance, but much more importantly, a loss to the entire country and, of course, to his family. So if I may just say condolences, real sincere condolences to the family. Although Tata Mlangeni was of advanced age, he wasn't young, he lived a good life. But when it happens, Kathy, as you know, when it happens, it hits hard. So sincere condolences. From my side, I mean, I've not been able to stop thinking about Tata Mlangeni for 1 minute today. I mean, it's, you know, he's been such a source of strength, of inspiration, and in a way, it's the saddest loss of them all. Now, he is the last of 8 Rivonia trialists, and of course, the world wept when Tata Madiba died, and all of the other Rivonia trialists were all extraordinary people, but he is the last. He's the last of a generation, and in that sense, I think it brings a sadness that is much greater than any of the sadnesses we experienced with the former, all the other Rivonia trialists who have passed away. This is a deep sadness, and it's sort of the end of a generation. It leaves a void, and I think the message for us, Kathy, is how do we fill that void? How do we step into their shoes? How can we become the Rivonia trialists of today, the people of principles? What do we do to uphold those values, to promote those values, and to live the kinds of lives that they expect of us? And I think that is our big challenge, to look at ourselves very carefully and say, is our country going in the right direction? Are we ourselves doing the right things? Are we living up to their expectations? Those are the many thoughts that went through my mind in the course of the day.
It's interesting because you, like many others have done throughout the day, have been specifically highlighting the character of Ndade Mlangeni as being one of the things that stood out most about him. And one almost gets a sense that his loss is also seen as a loss of something in the ANC, that he represented integrity, he represented truth, and that his dying goes far beyond just him no longer being on earth, but what happens to that moral conscience of the organization.
Yeah, well, quite right. I mean, I do believe that all of the Rivonia trialists were quite extraordinary people, and it's a rare thing that you would have 8 people so long ago imprisoned, men of great courage, and they were all men, as it happens, and now it's women and men that have to show the same courage and uphold these values. But the fact of the matter is that throughout their lives, all of them maintained their dignity, their integrity, their commitment, their humility. Every one of the 8, they were all extraordinary people. So the good news for me and the light is that while there are many, many challenges, there are many wrongs that need to be stopped, both within our own organization, the organization Tata Mlangeni belonged to until right at the end, and the one I belong to, the ANC. And there are things happening, across society that we just simply have to, acknowledge and do our best together to combat and to change and to fix. And it's now up to us. And there are many people, there are millions of people of integrity in our country, millions of people who I think are ready to take up the challenge. We must do it. We must do it. And so we are kind of giving the honors to Tata Mlangeni and all the Rivonia trialists that they deserve. There's nothing more that we can do or better than we can do than to live a life according to the example that they set us, and to carry on the struggles that brought us our freedom, But clearly we know that there are immediate challenges, many, and we have to rise to these challenges. I think the big lesson from people like all of the Rivonia trialists is not to be introspective as political parties, but to see our task as party representatives, those who are, and this is a collective task facing our country, not just for politicians or party representatives, but those who are, see the party as a vehicle towards an end and not an end in itself. So you've got to use your platform, wherever your platform is, whichever party you belong to try to bring about that positive change and to bring fulfillment to the cause and the matters and the principles that the Rivonia trialists stood for so steadfastly. And I think, that's the message that we need to internalize, and that's the message that we need to live out. We need to be the change, to use a well-known phrase, to say not wait for change to come, but to activate the change ourselves in whichever corner we occupy, whichever platform we have. Stop attacking each other as much as possible. I mean, clearly we have a right to criticize each other, and that shouldn't be stopped. But the form that it takes these days is very often very ugly. Often it is people like yourself, Kathy, and other journalists who are feeling the brunt of it. It's wrong. And we know from Tata Mlangeni, a man who was deeply respectful of other people. He was loved. And that's why I say it's a day of mourning to many, many people, not just within our organization, because I can't imagine anyone in our country that would not have held him in the highest regard and would not have loved the man for what he was, for his humility, his humor, his gentleness. He was a caring individual, deeply committed to bringing about social change, deeply committed to social justice, and clearly, going right back to the time of the Rivonia trial, was prepared to pay the highest price for it. They were facing the gallows. He was prepared to be hanged and to be killed, to die for a cause that he believed in so firmly, and he believed in that cause right up to the end.
And Derek, I certainly believe that there are many people in this country who are hoping and wanting to be their change, but that are also frustrated by the system and frustrated by a government that seemingly doesn't take some critical issues such as corruption as seriously as it needs to. You would know about some of the reports of corruption that have been taking place even under COVID-19 and the misuse of funds that are meant to assist the most vulnerable in our communities right now, and those are still being looted. So where then does the legacy of Andrew Mlangeni lie? Who is carrying that legacy within the ANC? And how does that translate to an organization that not just speaks out against corruption, but whose employees will in fact live out those values?
Yes, of course, not just within the ANC, but we must all speak out against corruption, and we must all, identify corruption where it occurs, not just in government, but in the private sector. Wherever corruption occurs, we have to see ourselves as custodians of these values, and it's wrong to assume that it's only in government or only in the ANC. It happens in other parties. The thing not to do. For example, I saw in the media this morning that a councillor from a particular party was found guilty of selling illicit cigarettes in Limpopo province. I don't think it's right to blame the party, blame the individual for that act of corruption, that act of criminality. And so when you talk about the corruption that we're experiencing currently, and especially in the midst of this tragedy, if you like, in the midst of this pandemic, of course we should be worried about it, and of course we should act against it. I was heartened by the rapid response by the Premier of KwaZulu-Natal. I mean, they found a case of corruption and they're acting on it, and they're acting promptly. So I think it's a mixed story. I think that unfortunately, greed has set in our society. The people who are corrupt are often the people who need it least, people who already have money, already have much more than the poorest people in our country, and yet they seem to forever want more. And so it's greed that is a real pandemic in our country, if you like. But we must act. And so, and we must challenge political leaders from any party when they condone wrongdoing or at any level of government, any province, any local government, where there is corruption, we have to be whistleblowers, we have to expose the corruption, and we have to act. And, failure to act should be a reason for legitimate criticism leveled at a party if the party is not acting decisively and firmly enough to combat this kind of corruption.
Sure, and I take the point on the fact that it's a widespread problem, but I center it around the ANC because Andrew Mlangeni is somebody who served in the ANC, chaired the party's integrity committee, and has been vocal about some of the issues that have been plaguing the country that are stemming directly out of the ANC.
Yes, the message is that those of us who feel very strongly about it, and I do believe the majority of ANC members are not supporters of corruption and are not corrupt themselves, we must do what we need to do and actively. We've come from a bad period. Let's not escape that. Things went badly wrong, and these things worried Tata Mlangeni very deeply, and it worried many of us. And we're navigating our way out of that period. So we're seeing action, not as quickly as we would like to see it, but we're moving forward towards the kind of society that we believe that the Rivonia tribe has fought for. But it's a long road. For us to pretend that the corruption doesn't run deep, that would be a mistake. It does run deep. But at the same time, it must be said that there are many very good civil servants, public servants, who are completely honest and who are in where they find themselves, whether it's a DG of a national department or a CEO of a state-owned company. We did have some very bad and inappropriate appointments. There's no question about it. And we haven't yet passed through that. So many of the people who were appointed during that unfortunate phase are still in positions. They don't just get wished away overnight. But good appointments are being made, and so the attempts to deal with it are ongoing. And there are many. I think the very fact that the VBS used that as an example. I know it was quite controversial with the decision as communicated, the NEC decision. But what we need to welcome is the fact that arrests were made, and that the criminal justice system is now dealing with the case with their own capacity limitations. We know about them, and I think what is happening under the various very good leaders that we now have of the NPA, of the Hawks, is that they are slowly rebuilding capacity to deal with these cases. But the fact that they are committed to dealing with it and that they are dealing with it, there are some heartening and encouraging signs. We have a long way to go, though. There's no escaping that.
Mr. Hanekom, once again, condolences for your loss tonight, and thank you for coming on to the show to reflect on the life and the legacy of Andrew Mlangeni. We'll leave it there for tonight.